Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another session of Ask Zak with myself, Zak, and my trusted colleague, Sean.
Good evening and welcome back.
And tonight we're going to look at poultry house management. And why is it so important? Now, the big thing is, remember, poultry farming is intensive farming, and we try to basically influence the environment so that their production is optimal. And when you know how to manage that environment and get those optimal levels, your animals will be productive, and that's what you need. You need as much growth in as shortest time as possible, as little as possible disease outbreak, and of course, at the end of the day, delivering constant temperature for your animals, because we always talk about constant temperature gives you constant growth. So it's incredibly important that environment that you have there, you've got influence over it, and you can influence your production by using it correctly. Now, when it comes to using it correctly, I think, Sean, one of the first questions we get a lot is, how do we use our curtains to open and close? How do we use it correctly, and is there a correct method of using them?
Okay, Zak. Well, very important. We're trying to move away from the old structuring of your curtains on the outside. So your curtains shouldn't open from bottom up, but they should open from top down. That means you must get air coming in on top before it comes in at the bottom. Reasons being, we want to keep your chickens in as good, comfortable temperature, less fluctuations of temperature as possible. So always use your curtains to make sure that there's ventilation, there's air coming in through and not affecting your chickens. Keeping the air moving in the inside and making sure that your temperature is constant. That is the basics around your curtain use. So your curtains are there to manage your ventilation and temperature. So use it adequately, no drafts, no overheating, no underheating. Just try your best to keep it constant.
So another thing that we've got there when it comes to our poultry house management is 3 things that our Heavenly Father gave us that are free and that we need to use as much as possible. And that's look, listen, and smell. When we get to a farmer, we encourage them as much as possible to spend time within their poultry house. The behavior of your animals will tell you directly what is wrong and what you need to adjust on. Let's say you've got chickens huddling in corners, by example. You know there's an incredible draft through, and that's where Sean came in with the correct use of your curtains. Then you need to know you need to manage your curtains better. Of course, smell. One of the most well-known smells is the ammoniac, that sharp burning smell. Please, if you spend time in that poultry house, do not just stand there. Go sit on your haunches as low as possible to the chicken's level. You need to experience and feel what that chicken is experiencing and feeling. Otherwise, it makes your life much more difficult. Another example, of course, is when we look at our chickens, whether they're too hot or too cold. When they are too cold, of course, they're huddling together and just trying to get heat from each other, and in that way they of course trample each other and they do not eat. When those chickens are cold, they do not eat, and when they're not eating, they're not growing. So there's a lot of small things you'll be able to pick up by just spending time inside your poultry house. Now, one of the other tools that we have, of course, inside our poultry house is our feeders and drinkers. Now, Sean, when we do farm visits, we run into a lot of problems with feeders and drinkers. What can you say to the farmers? What should they look out for?
Well, Zak, very important. The feeders and the drinkers are the basic source of your growth in the house. So if you don't manage it properly, you won't have enough eating space, or you won't have enough drinking space. If your chickens don't eat, they don't grow, they don't lay eggs. If they don't drink, they don't eat, they don't grow, they don't lay eggs. So very important. The general basics that we always tell our clients and also family is that always keep it at 3 drinkers and 3 feeders per 100 chickens. Reason being, the standard level is 1 drinker for 50 chickens, but then we want to put in an extra one. So that extra one is that in each and every circle there's a pecking order. Those ones that cannot reach, that are not allowed, which are bullied out of the drinkers, the two other drinkers, can go to the third one and have a little bit more eating and a little bit more drinking, so that you don't have different growths in one cycle. So always remember, if your chickens don't eat and they don't have enough water, your growth is hampered. Your performance is going to be very much hampered.
That, of course, links up with the look, listen, smell. If you've got uneven growth in your poultry house, bigger chickens and smaller chickens of the same age, that is 100% what Sean is saying right now. And of course, very, very important, we've got those animals in close contact with each other inside a building. So when we talk about biosecurity, we're talking about keeping a disease out of your poultry house. Now, one of the things we see the most when we arrive at a poultry house is the lack of foot baths. People do not realize how crucial a foot bath is to keep your animal safe. Remember, yourself, your workers, or anybody entering your poultry house might have been in a site that might have come in contact with a disease. Now, that disease, of course, sticks to your feet. And when you walk that into your house, of course, the bomb is going to burst sooner than later, and you're going to lose money. That is just one example. Another example is, of course, wild birds. Wild birds are one of the carriers of our avian influenza, and we know how hard it hit the South African poultry market. There's still shortages of day-old chicks because the farms had to cull full breeders and cull all of them, and that's why we have a shortage. So just by managing what comes in and out of your poultry house, that's going to save you in terms of disease outbreak. Only the people that's supposed to go working there can go in there, and yourself, of course, because you need to spend your time in there, as we said, and of course no other animals except the chickens. Otherwise you open yourself to unnecessary risk. And there are very few, we always say in Afrikaans, 'n boer maak 'n plan. Farmer always needs to think on their feet, and they make a plan to combat things like that. Now, Sean, when it comes down, when we look at a poultry house, how do we measure the performance? How do we know that house is doing well or not?
Well, Zach, very simple point. We've already spoken about this, but then I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on it. Just like Zach said, biosecurity is your point of entry. Wherever you start is your biosecurity. Biosecurity makes your own house its own universe. So it's an own universe away from other universes. You are handling it for yourself. The world, what happens outside, does not affect you. That's the first point. And secondly, this is how you measure the performance of your house. So minimal diseases, number one. If there's less diseases, that means you are good at your disinfection. You're doing a very good at disinfecting your house, so your chickens don't suffer from other diseases that come from bacteria in the house. Secondly is minimal temperature fluctuations. That means you've got your thermometer. Your thermometer is at the right level. You're measuring on a daily basis, getting 2 readings once a day to make sure that the temperature is within what your chickens require. And then thirdly is your ventilation. The only way that you can see how good your ventilation is by walking into your house, smelling what it smells like inside, and also seeing the temperature fluctuations. If there's a lot of temperature fluctuations, you have drafts. If it smells very high in ammonia, like Zach said, there is a high level, there is no ventilation. That means all the moisture sticks inside the house. So lastly, and very, very important, the only way to see that everything that I've just said works is if you weigh your chickens. The weight of your chickens shows that it's in the right path, you're in the right path, they're growing, and if they're growing, that means you have minimal problems from your temperature fluctuations or your ventilation or anything else. So always make sure, these are the 4 important things. Make sure that your chickens are growing well, make good management of your house.
And just to round off all these things that we said, of course, most important is your record keeping. We get to farms, we ask what Sean mentioned the temperatures, and they just tell us, Angas, we're not sure. Or we ask what was your mortalities or your weights. If you do not write those things down, you cannot see where you're going. You're flying blind. So record keeping helps you, and of course when we get to a farm and we need to help you, because that's what we're there for. And that's one of the things we always do. We've got the transfer of knowledge, which is big to us. And this week, Sean, you and the team, you're busy out there.
Well, this team, this week we're in Grollersdal and Hoedspruit. Grollersdal, an information day in Grollersdal for sheep and goats and cattle. And then in Hoedspruit, we have a pig farmers day. So all your piggy people come and join us in Hoedspruit, and all your sheep farmers and your cattle farmers come and join us in Grollersdal this Thursday. Just make sure to call at the depot and book a space for yourself. And remember, follow us on Facebook to make sure that you keep up with where we're going at all times, and you'll get our contacts and everything and anything that you may need in order to communicate with us.
And of course, all these things free of charge. You just need to show up. So that is all for this evening. Thank you to all. Stay tuned for next week. And from my side, have a good evening.
And from my side, have a good one.